mentioned that this has been a pervasive problem. How did it come about? When was it recognized?
So let me start. We have been at the Community Foundation investing in programs to close the middle school achievement gap in mathematics for a very long time, for over 6 years. And we knew anecdotally from our grantees working on the ground with students that regardless of what they did in their programming, students still that had demonstrated proficiency at the end of 8th grade in Algebra 1 were still placed in Algebra 1 when they got to 9th grade. But we didn't have the numbers to prove it. In 2010, there was a report out called the Pathways Report. The author is Steve Waterman. And he, for the first time, was able to put into numbers how many of these kids that had demonstrated proficiency at the end of 8th grade were placed again in the same course. And we found that that this happened predominantly to kids of color or kids that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. The problem is not that we're only holding the kids back, and we might really hurt their ability to complete their A through G requirements and therefore go to a public university in our state. The biggest problem is that the second time that these kids went into the same course, they succeeded even only half the times when they had already demonstrated proficiency before.
Well, I would think, never mind their performance the second time around, the harm, the real harm is done the first time around, holding them back in the first place. And I would like to know, and it's not a question for the two of you at this point, or for you, Gina, at this point, how that could happen. But you've had an experience saying, so talk to us about your experience. What happened to you?
Well, I first heard about it in conversation with Gina when I first met here with her. And basically, I thought it was normal. You know, I had the assumption that people who take algebra in 8th grade go on to high school and take algebra again because it had happened to me, and I had been successful in math in middle school. And so there was never any reason to really question it. And my parents had always focused on our education to make sure that, you know, we were getting the best opportunities. And so it seemed like they were trusting in the system, I was trusting in the system. And it just seemed very normal until I read the report and heard about this, and I said to myself, that was me. And I realized, I made the connection that when I started college, that I was behind because there was a class that my peers had taken that I had not taken.
So how did that happen? Let us say you're in 8th grade. You were good in math, one assumes. So what happened? Does the teacher come to you when it's time for you to go on to 9th grade to say you're going to be repeating algebra?
You know, I don't think there was a conversation like that, at least that had happened with me. And my parents were very involved parents with my school, and I had an older brother who went through the same classes, and I don't think that conversation happened with him either. It just seemed like we were trusting the system, and I think at the end it was just one of these problems that we weren't aware of.
But when it was time for you to go on to 9th grade, this is when it happened to you? What happened?
So I don't think it was one of those things where you said like this happened and then that happened, because it wasn't something that we really noticed until it's been 10 years now. My brothers and we aced math. I was a 4.0 kid as a middle schooler. I went into the AP track and the honors track of my high school. I even went off to take AP Calculus as a senior in high school, and I graduated with a biochemistry degree from University of Pennsylvania. So I took 4 semesters of calculus in college. So I was always good at math, and I always focused on math, and it wasn't anything that just kind of stuck out.
But were you aware that you were repeating?
I was totally not. I was aware that I was repeating. I wasn't aware that it was abnormal, because there was nobody who I went to middle school with who had taken anything else beyond what I was taking, which was the same course. Yeah. As somebody who was excelling and kind of setting the mark of achievement, you would have thought that I would have been placed with some of the other friends of mine who were doing well in a higher level, but nobody had. I was in the honors track of my high school in 9th grade, and I was repeating the same course.
And that seemed normal to you?
I was 15, 14. I mean, my real focus was getting straight A's and getting good SAT scores. It wasn't questioning the system of education that was being provided for me.
And you got an A in the class?
Yes, yes. I graduated with 4.0.
And when you retook it, you got an A in it?
Yeah, well, I was very focused on getting into a really good college, so there wasn't going to be anything that was going to make me not get an A.
Well, I'll have some follow-up questions for you later. So, Rhonda, you have a child in what, middle school now? Or?
No, so my daughter, Lauren, she's 10 years old, and she is in elementary school. And I think my story really starts back in Boston, actually. I'm a physician, and my husband is a pastor. And he got a call to a church here in the peninsula. And so I had to close down my practice back in Boston, and we had to look for a school here in Palo Alto, or at least in this area. And so online, Palo Alto seemed to be the best school. The Palo Alto schools were getting 10 out of 10. And so we really took our time. We sold our home, and we got a little shack here in Palo Alto, all because we wanted to put our daughter in the best schools available. And we knew that even if she couldn't get the school that she was zoned to get, all the Palo Alto schools are great, and so we would do well. This was my thought on paper when you research it online. So when we arrived here, midway through her 3rd grade year, I met with her teacher in one of the Palo Alto elementary schools, and I wanted to let the teacher know just what type of family we were and how it is our goal for our daughter to excel and exceed and do well. And I said to her that I just want to let you know that when it comes to math, my daughter just naturally understands the concepts and does very well in math. And I brought her scores for her standardized testing and showed that even starting in kindergarten, she was scoring in advanced in all areas. And the response that I got back was very discouraging. It was, don't worry, she'll pass. Don't worry, she won't fall through the cracks. And I couldn't get her teacher to understand that it's not my goal for her to not fall through the cracks. It's my goal for her to exceed standard, to excel, because this is something that she's naturally gifted in.
Well, some people would say, you said it was discouraging. I could think some people might say that was comforting for the teacher to say to you, well, don't worry, she'll do well, or she won't fall through the cracks. If she is what you say she is, then there won't be any problems.
And I think that's what she expected me to be happy with that answer, that I should be happy with mediocrity, that if my daughter is in the middle of the bell-shaped curve, that's the goal, for everyone to kind of make it in the middle of the bell-shaped curve.
Why did you assume that that's what she meant, and that was mediocrity?
Well, because that's, the conversation we had went on for about an hour, and I'm summarizing. And basically her point was that the goal is to make sure everyone passes. It's not, sort of like what Sang said. Now, if Sang is doing excellent work, excelling all the way through, then they should be able to look at his case and say, instead of putting him in the same class that everyone else gets in 9th grade, let's look outside of the box. He's excelling in math. We're going to put him in this special extra class. You see? No, maybe he's not excelling in the same way in writing or reading or history, but math, that's his forte. Let us nurture that natural gift that he has.
Henrietta, you asked the question, why does this happen? I think Rhonda is giving you the perfect description of why this thing happens, and it happens because sometimes there are conscious or unconscious biases that adults have of what kids can achieve. And if we set the expectation low, right, that's what the child that's where the child will go.
Now, you have children in the Palo Alto school system.
I do.
Have you run into Rhonda's experience? And we'll get back to you to say more about your experience, to hear more about it.
So I do. I have a son who's now in Pali, but he as well worked very, very hard and was excelling in mathematics in 8th grade. And you know, he scored top of his class. The summer comes and I receive a pink letter that says, your child has been recommended for the summer bridge program before he enters high school. Now, you would say, well, great, he's having an additional, you know, instructional opportunity. Here's the issue. I called the teacher. I said, why has he been recommended? She's like, I don't know. I didn't recommend him. I called the counselor.
First of all, what's wrong with the bridge program?
Well, it's supplementary instruction for kids that are not achieving at the level. So it's to prepare them for higher level coursework in high school. But my kid had scored an A, both as a grade as well as in standardized testing. Nevertheless, he had been recommended for this program.
So why do you think he was recommended?
Well, I went through I asked everybody because I knew what was happening. Somewhere along the line, probably it's a program that's funded by Title I resources, and we are a Latino family, we're a Mexican family. And therefore, at some point, there's a little box in his file that says he's a Latino. And so he got recommended. Now, here's the big issue. Here's the big issue. If my child would have seen that letter after working so hard to get his A, it would completely have crumbled his spirit.
So
and that is what's happening to the kids.
What happened? Did he go to the bridge program?
No, I grabbed the letter, I tore it, I put it in the wastebasket, I called the district and I said, my kid scored an A. I just had his, at that time it was the CSTs, he's scoring proficient, close to advanced in his results. So he doesn't need the summer bridge program.
Who had recommended the summer bridge program?
The system.
Now, the system, you mean maybe it went through the computer and everybody who was a minority?
Probably. I cannot say.
I think
but
you're absolutely
probably.
right. I have a lady who goes to my church, has 2 kids who went to Jordan Middle School. And both of them they're people of color, and both of them were scoring A's in their math. And they got that same exact letter, and she did the exact same thing. And I think that a similar thing happened to my daughter Lauren, where in her STAR testing, she scored advanced in all the areas and 100% in 4 subcategories. And on all of her math tests, she got 95% or better on every math quiz or test or homework. But then when it came down to getting the grade, she got meeting standard. So it didn't matter that her scores were in the 95 percentile and that she scored advanced in every area. And this is not because, I'm not sure why her teacher did this. We had a conversation with her teacher and she could not explain to me why.
What did she say? You said she couldn't explain it. She was the one that made the decision, right? And that wasn't something that she had done with the other children.
I don't know how she graded the other children. I only have my own child's, but I did sit down and talk with her and say, am I missing something? Because everything that my daughter's brought home in math has been 95% or greater. But then when I get home and I see the score, it says meeting standard. And in my mind, meeting standard means
Was that
average?
the explanation of the grade, or was that there in place of a grade?
Yes, so in the Palo Alto elementary schools, there's not A, B, C, D, F. It's like below standard, meeting standard, exceeding standard, something like that.
And she was exceeding the standards.
Well, I thought that she was exceeding standard, getting 95% or better in all testing and scoring advanced in all categories of the STAR test. But according to her teacher, she was meeting standard. So I'm just adding more evidence to what Gina is saying, and I think it's so great that someone who's running for office takes up the hard issues. I think it's so easy to gloss over this, sweep it under the rug, and me too. I did not want Lauren to see her report card because she'd gotten literally 90% or higher in every single subject, but she never got a single exceeding standard.
Okay, now Sang, before I get to you, let me go back. Some would think, given the fact that parents pay for extra tutoring for their children, if your son could have had the opportunity for the summer, because children lose a lot during the summertime, and if he could have been taking a refresher course or having some extra supplemental help, that this would have been good. So why did you see it as a negative?
There's a couple of things that are fundamental for kids' growth. The first one is a great teacher. The second one is a great learning environment with high expectations for all children. And the problem is the messages that we're sending. They have a huge influence in our kids' ability to thrive. If after working very hard a whole year, getting grades, making the mark, excelling, we tell our students, you didn't make the mark, you need that extra thing, you didn't quite make it. It crumbles what they believe in themselves, in what they can achieve.
And it wouldn't make them work even harder.
It doesn't. We see it. There's ample evidence that the kids will rise up to the level of expectation. Ample evidence. And what we're telling our kids is, we've got lower expectations for you.
Saying you had to repeat the class.
Can I just comment on what Gina was saying? Because I think so after I heard about it, I had a kind of gut reaction that was a little bit of like, oh geez, like shock. And then after I actually read the report, like I pulled out the report and read through it, I got like extremely angry. I got very upset. It's a very upsetting report to read because you realize that you've been pumped through the system. And so what Gina was protecting her son from is probably what I wish that somebody had protected me from, because you work really hard and you excel. And I actually did attend summer schools to excel at math in middle school, and I did Princeton Review, and I even took summer college courses as a high school student at Temple University. And so
you were better for it, were you? Do you think you were better for it?
I think that adds a lot to why I'm successful as an adult. But having read the report, it like brings you back into 16-year-old mode.
Okay, before you go further, what was it about the report that made you so upset?
Well, it personalized that I had wasted some time where my parents had taught me that time was extremely valuable, especially when you're young and especially if you want to be competitive in the world. My parents had taught me not to compete with the kids in my school, but to compete with everybody around the world. They think of yourself in that way, and I do. And that was a part of it. And then the other part is that it immediately reminded me of the second week when I was at Penn, and I remember the professor asking a question, and a bunch of the kids in the class raised their hand and they knew this answer, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And that report reminded me why I didn't know what all of my peers knew, because they had taken Calc 2 in high school and I was still taking Calc 1 because I had repeated algebra. And that really stuck with me. And it's been 10 years since I've graduated college, and that reaction was a very gut reaction that I had.
So what did you do when you found out that all of your classmates had taken Calculus 2 and you hadn't?
I worked harder to catch up with folks, but it wasn't just me. This is by no means was it just me. Even in the last month and a half of talking to folks about math misplacement, you realize how common it is. And it's not just the African American or the Latino kids or the Asian kids, it's low income kids. It's kids who go to school in suburbs that are, in suburban areas that are not necessarily extremely wealthy or middle class areas. It happens a lot.
Well, one would think when we talk about math misplacement, we talk about minority kids, and you just now said it's not just African American or Latino, but one doesn't necessarily think of the stereotypes in terms of Asian students who perform better. So how do you explain? One would think many people have the high expectations of Asian students. So how is it you ran into low expectations?
There was actually kind of two things that I was thinking about. One was it is odd that it would happen to an Asian American student who was actually doing well in math, that they would be held back in math. That was one. I thought it was the irony of it was something. And then the second part was that I'm the younger brother of someone who excelled in math and took the same exact courses that I had taken, and he had done summer school, he had gone to Princeton Review, and he had gone on to Yale, and he's an attorney now, and he's doing extremely well, and we both went into the same trap, and we just kind of both trust the system going through it. But like, it was weird that they made the mistake twice over, and so I think that was something about that was extremely upsetting, because I talked to my brother about it 2 weeks ago when I went back home to Philadelphia.
And he's upset about it?
Yeah, we talked about it. We said, he goes like, yeah, that's normal. And I was like, well, it's not
Normal?
normal.
It's not normal.
It's not normal. There's like this thing, there's this report that says it's not normal. And it was kind of just flabbergasting, because when you're a young person, you don't really question all of those things. You're not really taught to like question, should I be in this math class? You expect that they put you in the math class that's appropriate. And especially if you're in like the highest achieving math class, you expect that that's the right one for you. You never say like, is this the highest, like that doesn't sound like a normal thing for a kid to do.
Sure. Now, Rhonda, I find it just a little strange when you ask the teacher performing at what was it?
The meeting standard?
Yes, that you couldn't get a clear answer. So I'm going to have to ask you again, what was the explanation that you can remember?
There wasn't an explanation. She told me that she doesn't typically give out exceeding standards. And it was a bit of an awkward and tense-filled time. And, since the conversation I had with her was really to just help solidify our decision to leave the Palo Alto School District. We made a big, huge transition to come here, and now we're going to have to look again and figure out where is it going to be best. It's a painful situation. And what happened to Sang, where he was in that class and everyone raised their hand but him, imagine that same sort of thing happening over and over and over to kids of color, and how it can have, kind of going back to your point, Henrietta, so why would it be bad to go to the Bridge program? It's like over and over and over someone is telling you, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can't do it, even if you are doing it.
So it seems to me, are you working with other parents?
I think that I am trying to work with other parents as much as possible. I think everyone has a little bit of a different story and a little bit of a different circumstance.
But have you all, I think you mentioned being a part of a group, a parent group?
So we have a group of parents in Palo Alto, mostly parents of color. And we had an opportunity to talk to Dr. McGee, the new superintendent. And this is as a parent, this is not as a staff of the community foundation. And he was incredibly receptive to listen to all these stories. And I'm optimistic because all it takes is the will to set very high expectations and truly look at the system in order of where are we sending the wrong messages to our kids.
Yes,
so,
and go on, I'm sorry.
No, so we're trying to think about how to organize ourselves to better help the school district assure an excellent experience for all our kids.
Sure, I ask you about the parent group because I'm thinking, given everything that you and your family did to get here into the school system, the district, and it's a very high-ranking district, why not have you considered working with other parents to make the changes, to confront, if I could use that word, the principal, to have meetings, to say, we don't understand what's going on, we think this needs to change, what are you going to do about it?
Well, it's a big question. Do you stay and fight, or do you leave and hopefully get into a private school where you pay people to treat your child with respect?
But they still might run into the same problem, given that we're talking about people being biased.
That's absolutely right. I think it takes a huge amount of time. I dedicate a lot of my free time doing exactly what Sang's parents do, which is really talking to Lauren about the importance of excelling in educational areas. Now, if I have to stop and fight a fight about unconscious bias and people who are unconscious about their bias, it takes a huge amount of time away from what I really want to do, which is make sure that Lauren is growing and thriving in the areas that she's passionate. So it's just a decision of how much time do I want to commit to this process.
And I could certainly understand that on a personal basis. If this is something that's pervasive, then one has no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to escape it by making those personal changes. It's a system that has to be confronted. It's a system that has to change. And it's a system, I think, that if everything is as you say it is, that you're going to run into time and time and time again. I would think.